In this video, we're going to look in a bit more detail at the different kinds of pricing strategies that a business can adopt. So we have 3 learning objectives. We're going to first think about the different strategies that businesses can use when they're pricing new products. Secondly, we're going to look at the pricing strategies that businesses can use when they're looking at their whole product portfolio or product mix and how they price them together and in relationship to each other. And then thirdly, we're going to look at the ways that businesses adjust their pricing strategies for different customers and different situations. So let's start off by thinking about those new products. And basically, when companies are thinking about pricing strategies for new products, they've got 2 choices. They can either start off high, which is the case for market skimming, or they can start off low, which is the case for market penetration pricing. So market skimming is all about that high price at the beginning for those customers who are willing to part with that sort of money. And that means that the company will make fewer sales at the beginning, but each sale will be more profitable. On the other hand, market penetration price is all about starting with a low price to attract new customers and try to grow the market share. So why would a company start by setting a high price? It sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? Well, let's think about Apple. Apple's got a really strong brand. We all know Apple. We know about iPhones. When the latest iPhone is launched, very often it is launched at a very high price. This sends out some signals to the market, doesn't it? It tells us that this is a quality product, that it's maybe better than the competition because perhaps it's more expensive than the competition. It plants those seeds in our minds. And we know that there will always be some people who are willing to pay that really high price to be the first to own the new iPhone. And we see this happening not just with iPhones, but also with things like video games. Again, video games already have a high profile. Think about FIFA. Think about Call of Duty, think about Pokemon. When the latest game comes out from any of those, some people will want to be the very first to own that game, to play that game, and they will be willing to pay the high price for it. So when we look at these 2 different pricing strategies, we see that price skimming starts off with that really high entry price, and then when all the people who are willing to pay that high price, when they've all purchased the product, then the price is likely to be reduced and sales will pick up and more people will buy that product. On the other hand, penetration pricing starts with a really low entry price to attract new customers that maybe haven't heard of the brand before. And then as the brand becomes more established, as we all are more aware of the brand, then the price can be raised a little bit. So what are the pros and cons or the advantages and disadvantages for each of these approaches? Well, for price skimming, that high price at the beginning enables firms to increase their profit from those first few customers. And we can argue that consumers who wait can benefit from lower prices later on. But for the company, that high price at the beginning can help recoup some of the money they've put into the investment, the development of that new product. On the other hand, disadvantages, well, if I've paid the top price for my iPhone and I see it 6 months or a year later for much less money, I might feel a bit annoyed about that. And it's difficult. A firm needs to know exactly how high it can go, because if they pitch that price too high, then perhaps no one will buy and they'll lose market share. But price skimming isn't something that any business can do. To successfully do price skimming, you must have a really strong brand that people know about. You must have a degree of monopoly power so that people will come to you. People think there's not really a close substitute and they're willing to pay that high price at the beginning. With penetration pricing, of course, the pros and cons are more or less switched around the other way. So if no one's heard of my brand, if I'm a new company or a new brand and I set low prices, then I'm going to attract new customers in. It will raise my brand awareness. People will get to know the brand. I heard about when I was thinking of buying a new phone, I very nearly bought a phone by a new company called OnePlus. I hadn't heard of them before, but all the reviews I read said that this was a really good phone, as good as an iPhone, as good as the Samsung top models, but much cheaper. And the reason it was cheaper was they were trying to get customer awareness, brand awareness. They wanted to gain new customers like me. So for OnePlus, having that lower price was a quick way to gain market share in what's a really competitive industry. And over time, and we see this with OnePlus now because they're no longer that new, they have been able to increase their prices as consumers have become more aware of their brand. What are the downsides of penetration pricing? Well, that low price might mean that in the first few months you might have to sell at a loss. And that makes it risky because if your sales don't pick up, you might never recover that loss. And the other problem is it might start a price war with existing firms, and they might also cut their prices to kind of squeeze your new business out of the market. So it's a case of the right pricing strategy for the right business. Our second objective, we're going to look at how businesses set pricing strategies over their range of products, across their product portfolio, across their product mix. So there are a number of pricing strategies that a business can use here. And I'm going to talk in a bit more depth about 2 or 3 of them. And you can look at the others yourself in your textbooks. So let's start with product line pricing. If you remember from last week, a product line is a group of products that have something in common. So perhaps a group of hair products from the same manufacturer with the same branding, you would expect them to have not the same price, all of those products, but a very similar pricing strategy. So they appeal to the same kind of people who've got one kind of budget for hair care products. On the other hand, if we go down to the bottom of this list, product bundle pricing, this is a pricing strategy where businesses will bundle up their products together. So for example, I might be able to buy a computer games console and it might come bundled up with 2 or 3 computer games, and there is one price both for the console and the games all together. That's quite a popular way to get us to spend a little bit more money perhaps than we would have done before. Captive product pricing, what's that? Well, easiest to look at that through an example. Think about Gillette. Gillette has been the market leader in the market for razors for a long time now. And the strategy that they tend to adopt is that they charge a high price for their razor handles. And that tempts the customers in to buy this nice razor at a reasonable price. The problem comes for consumers when we want to replace the razor blades, and that's where the high cost comes in. Gillette tends to sell those at a much higher cost, giving them a higher profit margin. Because we're kind of captive customers by then, aren't we? We've bought the razor handle, so now we have to buy the razor blades that fit it. And you see the same pricing strategy used by companies that sell us printers, for example. We can buy a cheap printer, but when we go to replace the printer cartridge, that's expensive. The company's making a higher profit margin on that because we're a captive audience. So we see that on products where you have to get this accessory to make the product work. Electric toothbrushes and toothbrush heads are another good example of this. So that's captive pricing. So our third objective is understanding how companies adjust their pricing strategy to meet the needs of different customers and different situations. And this is our longest list of all, really. So we've got discount pricing, pricing for different segments, and so on. We're going to look at each of these in turn now. So the first one is discount and allowance pricing. This is exactly what it sounds like. This is offering a reduction in price for a specific period of time, or perhaps for a larger quantity. So that's to tempt people in to buy a set of products, perhaps at a particular time of year, a seasonal time like Christmas or Chinese New Year. And then there is allowance pricing. And this is where money is paid to the retailer in return for featuring the business's product in some way. So, for example, when you go into the supermarket and you see a big display of a particular product at the end of a supermarket aisle where it's highly visible, the chances are the manufacturer, the producer of those products on those shelves, have paid to get their products in that very prominent position. Allowance pricing. And then we have segmented pricing. And this is becoming increasingly popular, particularly as more and more people are buying products online. This is where a business will sell a product at different prices, perhaps to different people, or at different prices in different locations, or perhaps at different prices at different times. So these are all forms of segmented pricing. So think about this. Customer segment pricing. Let's go back to Gillette. If you look at razors next time you go into a supermarket, you will find you can buy men's razors and women's razors. And actually, they're pretty much the same, except that the women's razors tend to be pink and the men's razors tend to be blue or black. The other big difference between men's razors and women's razors is that women's razors tend to be more expensive. Why? Well, simply because research tells us that women are more willing to pay higher prices for beauty products. They're charging more, these companies, because they can. And then we have location-based pricing, where we might pay different prices for the same goods in different locations. Again, think about going to a supermarket. If you go to a big supermarket in an out-of-town location, you're likely to get quite low prices. You go to that same supermarket, but a smaller store on your high street. So let's say Tesco's. We've got the big out-of-town Tesco's where we have to drive to. It's a huge store, low prices. We go to Tesco's on the high street, round the corner from where we live, much smaller store. The prices will be higher because what we're paying for there is an element of convenience. And then there's this thing about time-based pricing, paying different prices at different times. And the most common example of this is traveling. Whether we go traveling by rail or we're traveling by train, we know, don't we, that we pay different prices at different times. We pay high prices when demand is high in peak times, and we tend to pay low prices when demand is low off-peak times. So this is where the business thinks about segmenting its pricing for different occasions. And then we have psychological pricing, because there is a lot of psychology in lots of marketing. And so this pricing strategy considers not just the economics, but the fact that the price says something about the product. So if I'm going to I want to buy a premium product, I'm kind of expecting to pay a premium price. And if the price is very low, I'm probably going to assume that this is not a very high quality product. So as consumers, we kind of have reference prices in our heads, a price that we think about and we expect to pay for a given product. And if the price that we see does not match what we're expecting, then that's generally not good. We're probably unlikely to buy. Another pricing strategy, promotional pricing. And this is similar to discount pricing in that these are temporary pricing strategies to increase short-run sales usually. So this would include discounts. It might include limited time offers, cashback offers, low interest financing, so buy now, pay later, all those kinds of things. Basically short-term special offers that encourage us to buy a product right now. This, I think, is one of the most interesting pricing strategies, and it's one of those pricing strategies that is really growing and growing right now, and mainly down to online shopping, dynamic pricing. This is the idea that a business can continually adjust its prices to meet the needs of the market, to meet the needs of individual customers and situations. And again, we've seen this, haven't we? If you go to book a flight, you know that the price you see when you look for a flight on one day is not necessarily the same price that you'll see tomorrow. As the airline sells more and more seats on a given flight, the price is likely to go up and up because supply of seats on that aircraft has now got smaller. If they feel, however, that close to the date when the flight is due to leave, if they've still got a lot of seats left, so they've still got a lot of supply, but not many people seem to be buying, demand is low, they'll lower the price. They'll reduce the price. So by watching how prices change for things like flights, consumers can really get some bargains. But of course, businesses use this system to maximize their profits. It's not just flights. Amazon has an automated dynamic pricing system, and this changes the price on as many as 80 million items on its site in a given day, based on all sorts of factors like demand in the short term, demand in different places, and so on. One trick you might want to try out is to go onto a shopping site. It can be Amazon, it could be somewhere else. Select some things you're interested in buying and put them in your basket, but don't buy them. Because what you may well find is, in many cases, that a day or two later, you'll get a message from the retailer saying something like, "We've seen that you've got this in your basket. Would you like to take a discount on this to encourage you to buy it?" So prices are very fluid now. They're changing constantly. The last kind of pricing strategy that I want to discuss is international pricing. So again, businesses have really two choices here. They can either have one price, a uniform price that they charge across the world, or they can have different prices in different local markets, adjusted for the market conditions really, and the cost of getting their products to that market. There are a few businesses, I think, who have one uniform price that they charge worldwide. And that's because maybe it costs them more to get products to some markets, or it may be that in some markets there's much more competition and that drives the prices down. It may be in some market there are some laws and regulations which increase their costs. It may just be about consumer perceptions of what we expect the reference price, that reference price we talked about in our heads. What do we expect the price to be? Also, it will depend on the marketing objectives. So, for example, a product that's well known and has high brand awareness in the UK may be a new product to people in China, for example, and therefore in a market like China, it may be more appropriate to use penetration pricing. So all sorts of factors here. So what we've seen here is many, many different pricing strategies that businesses use. Think about these for your mid-semester assessment. So we will end there, and there are a few questions for you to answer.